Hi, welcome to today's sequence. This is part 2 of Leading the Eye with Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I would highly suggest you go back and watch that first. In part 1, we touched on movement and how even the smallest and simplest of movements, character and camera, could lead us through a story. We'll briefly touch on that today as well, but we're going to focus on shapes today. How might composition and objects on screen create movement to lead the eye? For your reference, I included an uninterrupted version of the sequence once again. I have also included a still of one of our main characters from a different part of the movie. You can instantly feel the difference in connection and importance relative to their respective roles in the film. Something to note is that there's a clear shot choice difference between all the characters in this sequence compared to when we see the main characters of the movie. This is not an accident, and even though many shots were used for us to feel closer to these people, we are never brought in enough for us to feel like they are emotionally important. An interesting thing in this section is the distinct difference between what we saw in part 1 and here in part 2. Even though they are part of the same escalation, one side uses less complex shapes and the other uses many, to heighten the connection we have with who we see on screen. Let's get started. Here we have that cool shot we talked about earlier in part 1, but there's another fun thing that happens instantly. In order to signify the change of mood and mindset, we go from left to right to left here. Much of the sequence before this was purely left to right. It just really pushes the idea of something being different. Just a little callback to our screen direction video. One classic idea in filmmaking is to delay the reveal as much as we can. This is used in any and every situation. A horrific reveal, a surprise attack, a beautiful scenery, an introduction to a character, etc. Of course, this doesn't mean we just don't see what it is that the audience needs to see, but what this means is that we have a slow visual step-by-step escalation till we have to see it. We have a slow build-up to bring the audience into the show, and I'll take us through it, but the first thing to notice is how we are blocked off from the secret. The blinds add to the mystery, but we aren't fully blocked off, we are looking in from a distance. Just a quick example of how powerful movement is. Most of us probably missed that there was a cut here through this camera move. The camera movement and the shape of the pillar created the perfect gap in our minds to ignore that this is now a new camera angle altogether. I'm going to mention this character being the audience a couple times here, but this is a fantastic tool to show the audience what they should be looking at. Not only is it a tool to help us look in the right direction, but this is the next step in our building up of the reveal. Notice how we went from looking in through blinds from one window to looking in through the blinds with someone closer to the action. We're building the anticipation and the interest simply with the character and camera placement. In order to introduce a new idea, we reset the camera. This closed door is jarring to our eyes and therefore we blink, but then it is opened again immediately. We're being led into the plot. You might be thinking if we delayed any further we might lose the audience's interest. But that's actually not the case. We tease that we are going to reveal the problem by suddenly changing the way in which we show information. We go from an outsider looking in to someone in the room to hear the problem. But the delay is still there. It just feels like we are getting some more information because the setting is different and the way we are telling the story is different. Now comes some really cool shape language cutting. As you can see, the shape of the arm and the papers lead us straight to where the face is in the preceding shot. But not only that, the cut is helped by the shape of the hand, pointing straight to his face. You should get excited. This is a really strong tool to use. The audience's interest is carried effortlessly into the next shot. This is how invisible cuts are made. This next one here isn't movement, but it sure does make our eyes move in the right direction. Simply because the hand and the paper point to the face, we are already looking there. I highly doubt this shot would make any sense if taken from any other angle. These actors were placed where they were with precision. Also notice the guy that represents the audience. Right around the moment our eyes might wander over to him, he looks to the person speaking when important information is said. He wasn't that close in proximity in the previous shots. He too was placed there and told to do that purposefully. The following shot isn't as dynamic, but it is the same idea as the previous scene. It's almost comical how perfectly these cuts line up. The angle at which the character was looking matches up perfectly to the following characters. This is just one example of how knowledge of everyday human behavior leads to better filmmaking. We are automatically interested in what someone is looking at. Our eyes naturally follow their gaze. With this knowledge, we can have smooth cuts just by matching up the following scene with the eye direction of the character. This cut here lends itself to the idea of a new idea, hence the harsh foreground movement. Remember how most of our mind was leaning from screen left to screen right? Now that all the information has been gathered, it is time to go back and address the issue. But this is a technique we already covered. What's more interesting is the following cut. The conscious effort to keep the idea going leads us to the slight push to the screen left. It's subtle but effective. With such a drastic change in scenery, it's easy for the moment to feel jarring, but the way the camera leads the eye made the transition much easier. There are a couple interesting things to unpack here, but throughout the time we are on this particular location, we are tending to lead the eye through graphic visuals. Everything is almost laid out in a theatrical way, spoon-feeding the audience information about this particular family. It practically screams, classic American household, you should care. So when the emotional moments hit, it's almost as if they had been cheating. With everything just flowing into the next shot, we miss how blatantly on the nose this whole sequence is. As you can read on screen, there are more quick cuts here than anywhere in this entire sequence. It seems unnecessary, but for a 2-hour-long movie, breaking up the pacing and types of shots actually keeps the audience engaged. The purpose of these scenes is to accentuate the big dramatic, horrific moment of impending bad news. The rapid, odd cuts add to the hesitation, dread, and confusion of this character. On a side note, I don't think this style of cutting is as effective in a shorter medium. There just isn't enough buffer time for it to not jump out as odd. This is our classic, continuous leading of the eye in one direction. However, in this particular moment, we are lending the tool to something we had mentioned earlier, the information dump, if you will. Not only with movement, but with composition and lighting, our eyes go straight to the pictures on screen right. Again, we are spoon-fed that this is a family, they are tight-knit, and you should care. This effect is so strong that even though we are looking mostly at what is happening on screen left with the mother and the two gentlemen, we keep sensing the presence of those individuals in the photos. Our eye is left wandering throughout the frame with the space to feel emotions, knowing that there is nothing really new on screen that we have to pay much attention to. Everything is important, therefore nothing really is. Therefore, we have time as the audience to shed a tear. And then we end this sequence with a slow pull-out, as if we are coming out from a dream or a storytelling moment. With all this info, we now feel as though the movie is ready to truly begin. Part 2 was a bit messier than Part 1, but that just goes to show how much is contained in this leading the eye idea. It basically encapsulates the entire idea of cinematography, incorporating movement, shapes, lighting, acting, and time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe even learned something new or reviewed something from before. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.